On. All right, my mic's on. What is cracking? What's popping? What's shaking? This is another episode of the Comic Cinematic Universe. This is episode 11, and everybody, welcome Grace. Grace, say what's up to everybody.
Hello, everybody. Happy New Year.
Yeah, today we're doing a special show today because I will be heading out of town on Friday, so we decided to put this show together on Monday today. So I'm hoping that the audio sounds better here because the last episode my mic was kind of way back here, so we got like the reverb from my whole entire room here. I didn't really like the sound quality of it, so I brought my mic closer just so I can sound a little bit more clear here. How does this sound to you on your end?
This sounds good. And I'm going to give everybody a forewarning. I don't know where my headset is.
Okay.
I'm in the I think we mentioned it like last time too. And so I'm sorry if you guys hear noise on my end, but you sound great.
Thanks. So like you see in the title here, we are going to be talking about two topics. The first topic today is going to be the Disney Plus Day, which was I'm not sure was it Friday or Saturday? Do you know off the top of your head?
I think it was Saturday. I saw
Okay.
it on no, false. Friday, and then I saw it on later on that day, but it was Friday.
Well,
Yes.
one thing I know for sure is that day I didn't realize it was Disney Plus Day, but I did see something on Instagram as far as Disney Plus updating their Marvel kind of opening page, which it kind of looked awesome. Like I can't put it up here because I couldn't find any images online, but it's just a screen of you have everything that's current from Falcon, you have Black Widow, you have Wanda, Loki, and everything that is current today with the Marvel Cinematic Universe. So they kind of refresh their page just so it kind of looks brand new and getting ready for what's to come in 2022. So I do have an image of uh, pretty much all of the titles that they released on Disney Plus Day. So from the top, I'm going to read it from top to bottom. We got The Secret Invasion. We got Marvel Zombies. Agnetha House of Harkness. We got Ironheart. X-Men 97. I Am Groot. Moon Knight. She-Hulk. Miss Marvel. Echo. Spider-Man. Freshman year. And What If Season 2. Now, before we went live just now, I asked Grace what she's looking forward to most, but let's go ahead and throw it out into the universe. Which show out of all of these, because these are what 12 shows, which one of these has you the most excited?
All of the shows, I think Agatha House of Harkness is probably my favorite. I don't know if you listed it, but I know that they also announced like Guardians of the Galaxy, like the holiday special, is supposed to
I
come
didn't have
out.
that on the image. I messed up.
I feel like you're purposely trying to sabotage
mm,
me. No, so I think of like the ones you listed, because I don't think the Guardians of the Galaxy special is supposed to be like a show series. I believe it's supposed to kind of display as like a
right.
mini movie, if you. But of the shows, I think Agatha House of Harkness is my. I'm excited for it, especially because we just recently rewatched
Mm-hmm.
WandaVision for the episode. It's kind of fresh on my
Yeah.
mind, so I think that was the most exciting title for me to
Okay.
hear for sure. What?
For me, I would say honestly because I'm older and I was a fan of this show when I was super young. It's the X-Men series, you know. I'm super excited that they're bringing it back simply for the fact that I don't believe that series ended well. Um and what I mean is say the very last season of it there had been some slight changes from what it used to be when it initially came out from the animation and everything like that. It had a different look, a different feel, which I wasn't really fond of. So I won't be mad if being that this is going to be a brand new continuation of this, if they continue with that same style, it's fine. I'm happy that they're bringing everything back just because um aside from the X-Men movies, I grew up watching this show. This show was my maybe like everyday morning cartoon, not like Friday or Saturday, but like every morning while eating breakfast, I'm probably watching an episode of the X-Men. So that is the reason why out of all of these are my favorite. Or no, this one I'm the most excited for.
Yeah, that's how my partner was like, yes, the X-Men are coming
Yeah,
back.
yeah.
He's like, he's your age. I think it's something about you
Yeah,
guys.
yeah, yeah. I would say out of every one of those, this one may be meant for like the older crowd. Even though it's going to be for kids, you know, it's going to be an animated series. But like I feel like it's going to draw more as far as people in my generation. But one other show that I'm curious to see, just because we just had 2 episodes of What If geared towards zombies, is going to be the Marvel Zombies, and the font looks exactly like how you sent the those comic book covers before. So
Yeah.
when I saw that the little animation, it was kind of like, I don't know, it was like blood dropping, and then like the title came up. I was like, okay, all right. So they kind of got what was like a good feeling from the What If series, and they're gonna expand on that. So I'm really curious to see where that goes.
That's exciting as well. I think the zombie episode for What If was listed as like my number
Mm-hmm.
one. So that's really exciting. I'm curious, and I wonder if you picked up on it. I feel like I remember a couple weeks ago, around like the release of the What If episodes, that it was announced they were going to do a zombie, I don't know, film show. It seems like it's going to be a show, um, but a live
Oh,
action.
is
But I
it?
don't know if it's supposed to be a live action. Yeah, I heard earlier that there was going to be a live action zombies
Mm-hmm.
film. This announcement, I'm wondering if it's going to be similar to like the Guardians of the Galaxy holiday
Mm-hmm.
special, where it's just like a condensed movie, if you will, or if it's going to be a series. And then I don't know if it, I don't think they confirmed if it is going to be live action or
Yeah.
cartoon. The way that it was presented, I was like, oh, I think it's going to be cartoon, which I'm not opposed to, because obviously the What If series was done super
Right.
well. But if it's not live action, I'm kind of like, ugh. I was really, really looking forward to see um, these like characters in that like zombie
Mm-hmm.
s. But I guess it would be cool because that would mean they'd have to bring back,
Everybody.
everybody. And I guess it seems like it's kind of be like
Yeah.
animated, but either way, definitely a title I'm excited for sure.
And another title that wasn't listed up here is Hawkeye, because when we spoke yesterday, you told me about like the whole 14-minute video that Disney Plus posted up there. So I watched it, and they started out with a few minutes of each show that has already come out this year, and then they show like a teaser, not really like a trailer, but like a clip from Hawkeye, and in it. It has him and is she called Hawkeye as well? Like eventually, the girl.
I have the comics. They're like, I could see them. I haven't read them,
Okay.
so I would imagine that she does take on the like title of
Right.
Hawkeye. Is Miss Kate
Yeah.
Bishop? Well, yeah, that's like yeah. So I'm not too sure on that.
But from it, it looks like it's gonna be good. I've heard from other streamers, like they kind of quote unquote call it like the Christmas Die Hard version that like Marvel's kind of putting out, and I'm
Yeah,
not mad at that, just because Die Hard is a Christmas movie. I would argue that to this day, but also I'm curious. Well, not curious, more interested to see more of Hawkeye, because we got little tidbits here and there throughout the MCU, and then we get him turn into it's Ronan, right? Is that yeah?
yeah,
He turns to Ronan, and from there, like this show is just gonna be solely based on him. Now, I'm seeing him in this trailer. He's running around with this new character, and I'm seeing them take out a whole bunch of bad guys. But now my question is Yelena Belova in any way, shape, or form in this show? You know, because the way Black Widow ended, it ended with her in the cemetery with Val, and Val pointed out that Hawkeye is the reason that her sister's gone, which is twisting her mind up. So I'm curious just to see if she is going to be in this show. What do you think?
Oh, I don't think I know. She
Okay.
is. She is. I was actually disappointed to see that she's not in the trailer. But I guess that would just kind of pull away our attention because she has become a very beloved
Mm-hmm.
character. So I get it why they didn't add her in. But she is set to, if you see her on the IMDb, I haven't checked this recently, but I did look it up post Black Widow, and she was listed to appear in all 6 episodes of
Mm-hmm.
Hawkeye. So I'm excited for that to transpire. I really like that transition from just kind of what you were speaking about just a few minutes ago, from all of the little snippets we've seen of previous shows MCU wise on Disney Plus, and that like seamless transition into the Hawkeye like sneak peek, if you
Mm-hmm.
will. Very chilling. It was like, oh, I think it's the who I'm blanking. What's his name? The Watcher. The Watcher. The
Mm-hmm.
Watcher is like narrating, and then he takes like a slight pause. And he's like, and a new hero, and then it's just like the. So that was super satisfying. Like I had tears on the verge. But I'm excited to see this story because it definitely takes place post the events of obviously
Correct.
Endgame. But you're seeing Hawkeye essentially handle the repercussions of the 5 years that his family was not in existence because obviously he did some really like
Right.
horrible
Right.
things. I think I remember seeing a bunch of memes like post Endgame, like, oh, so are we just gonna forget that like Hawkeye killed like a lot of people in the past 5 years?
Mm-hmm.
Um, so it's kind of nice to see that they're addressing that in this film, and also obviously introducing a new character.
Right.
So
Like
really
they
excited.
would have to, just because after the first snap, he just turned super vigilante, and then by the time we get to Endgame, like he's taken out, I'm gonna say a member of the Yakuza, you know. So like it came down to the point to where I think Rhodey was having a conversation with Nat and saying that he was like in Mexico and he's been in like multiple places. It's hard to track him down or whatnot. So he's been not only in the U.S. but around the world, just being not a more so hero, but like a vigilante taking out whatever he can. And I'm assuming he was doing this just more so to think in some way that this would bring his family back. You know, he's doing a whole bunch of quote unquote good deeds just so he can get something that he knows back to what was taken.
I guess see in my interpretation of like what he ended up doing in those 5 years was like not I don't because I think he knew that wasn't going to bring his family back, but more so looking at it as like revenge. Like you are all horrible people and you guys are still here, but my children and my wife are
Mm-hmm.
gone. No, like you're out of here. And just because you mentioned that scene with Ronan and Black Widow, I realized, and correct me if I'm wrong, that Kate Bishop is wearing like the
Right.
Ronin like
Mm-hmm.
costume in the
Mm-hmm.
trailer. That was pretty
Yeah.
cool. That was a pretty cool like costume choice. So I'm excited to see. And then obviously she's going to transition, I think, into her more like traditional like outfit.
Correct.
Um,
But say
but
being that you mentioned that, being that she has this costume, I'm just going to say it's safe to assume that she wasn't snapped away. She wasn't blipped away. She knows who Ronan is, hence why she has that costume. And like I think she mentioned in the trailer, like she's been waiting for this moment, you know. So I guess this is more so a show of, or I'm guessing it's going to start off with the opportunity to meet her quote unquote idol, which is Hawkeye, and see if she could learn the tips of the trade. And they're going to have their silly moments to where I think I saw her shooting some of those trick arrows, and one of them ended up being like, I don't know, like a plunger type arrow or whatnot, getting stuck on a window. It didn't really do anything. So that's one thing I am kind of looking forward to, because as a whole right now it has a Marvel feel to it. So I'm super excited to check it out.
absolutely. And then just lastly on that, it also seems to retain that like cinematic quality that we've been really
Mm-hmm.
enjoying from the MCU far, and I just hope they
Yeah.
maintain that. Like, I'm all of these titles because I'm expecting them to be to that same quality that we've been seeing Loki, and all the other shows to this point.
With
So
that being said, I don't even think like why would they change it, you know? Because it the the only thing that has looked different in all of the MCU was WandaVision, but it was on purpose, but yet it was still cinematic. It had like a TV show look to it, but it still looked like it belonged in that universe, you know? So so I don't
and I'm
huh?
like change in tone or a change in some of form of like the cinematography in that
Right.
respect, but as long as that like quality that we've really been enjoying, which is it looks like it should be a
Right.
movie. Like as long as it's that, I think I'm and it fits with the story, then I'm excited for it for
Like as
sure.
far as content uh is concerned, I'm just gonna say it's going to have almost a very similar feel to um, Falcon and the Winter Soldier because they're not traveling to anywhere that's off color, off world, anything intergalactic. This is going to be another kind of like surface level show to where it's humans fighting other humans, nothing super crazy, you know, and it yeah, like you said, it does look like more so uh, like a movie. So yeah, shout out to Marvel and everything that they got coming out in 2022 because everything looks great. Like there was, I don't have the image, but there was like a little piece of like a little picture of old man Nick Fury. You know, he's been chilling with the scrolls, so I'm sure he hasn't been on Earth to get some just for men to blacken his beard a little bit. He's actually showing some grays here. He's looking pretty old. So I'm assuming he's going to be in the Secret Invasion. And one of the shows that I don't want to say I'm curious about, but like it's going to raise the question as far as when and how it happened is She-Hulk, because I did see an
Mm-hmm.
image of like there was Bruce Banner and her in the lab, and Bruce Banner doesn't have a calf. I mean a cast, like his arm is fully quote unquote healed. So this may have happened sometime before the events of Endgame during the blip. So I'm just curious. Well, I'll say I am curious just to see what that story is going to be about. And if that is the case, then there is a She-Hulk that didn't join in the end game war, but she's out in the world. So I guess Marvel has some explaining to do.
Oh, and you know something, that's a pretty good perspective. I didn't even think of that as an option. I assume this was probably maybe sometime post Shang-Chi, which is the last time that we saw Bruce Banner, and we obviously saw him in like a sling or like a
Mm-hmm.
cast. So I assume maybe it was like a sometime after where he's healed to the point where he no longer
Mm-hmm.
needs it. But I think that's a pretty safe, like, what's the word?
Assumption.
Hypothesis. Yeah.
Oh.
Going full science
No.
here. Um, that's a pretty good assumption to make. But then, of course, that raises the question: where the hell was
Right.
She-Hulk when we needed?
Precisely.
So I it's probably gonna be
Yeah.
after. I think it's
Okay.
after. Yeah,
All
but
right, so that is what we have for the Marvel talk with the Disney Plus day. So we are going to move it right along into the main meat of this show, which is going to be the Eternals. Now, I mentioned to Grace last week that this is going to be another episode of Chill versus Grace. Okay, Chill being the bad guy. Again, I don't mind being the bad guy because I have to be, okay? We can't always be in agreement. In order for this show to prosper, there's gonna have to be some beef between her and I. And
show was birthed because Phil and I don't agree
right,
often.
right. So say with the Eternals, okay? I'm going to give a quick intro as far as why this isn't I wouldn't say a top Marvel movie or MCU movie, but I would say it's not a great MCU movie. Okay, just because for me, I feel like a lot of everything, a lot of different aspects, they fell short. Because no matter what, uh, let's say comedy aside, there's always going to be little quibs, little jabs here that you end up thinking about later. To where here I can't really remember much of anything. I think maybe the funniest aspect for me was hold on, I'm gonna look up his name. I believe it's Karun,
Oh, uh,
and that is whatchamacallit's cameraman. You know, he may have been the
every
funniest aspect for this movie for me. And comedy aside, it just felt different. It felt a little too dramatic. I don't think there was. Yes, there was action, but I even feel like the action felt short. And I get it. This was a movie made by the Oscar winner. What's her name? Grace.
points off for us for not having her name on the go.
Right.
One second. Director Chloe
Yeah, Chloe
Zhao.
Zhao. Like, and I'm not mad that Marvel chose her because she has a good background in directing. It's just that she made this movie feel different. She didn't make this feel like a Marvel movie. And I think the biggest thing that I kept reading online, like this is the first movie to have a quote unquote sex scene in it. But like in that, yes, there was one of those scenes, but I don't even think the chemistry was there between Icarus and what's homegirl's name? It's not. It's Cersei. Yeah, exactly. So I don't know. The movie it fell a little short for me. Like there were good points, but it wasn't good enough for me to rate this high in the MCU scale.
So let me give my little piece on this because I definitely wouldn't put this movie on like the top end of the MCU films
Mm-hmm.
overall. I'd kind of smack it somewhere in the middle. And based on MCU's record, that's still pretty
Mm-hmm.
okay, you know? I definitely disagree with what was really shocking, which is the Rotten Tomato score, because this is the lowest rated MCU film, like,
Do you know what it is
period,
today?
which is I don't know the exact number, but it's less than Thor Dark World. And Thor Dark World is just kind of like uniformly agreed to be not the best, maybe probably the worst MCU movie. And even in that point, we can still like I can still rewatch and just be like, oh, okay, like I forgot about this part, and that's kind of cool to rewatch. But I definitely wouldn't rank it to that extent, and it was very shocking to me.
I just pulled
Um,
it up. It's at 47%.
Yeah, that is like, I mean, MCU to the side, that's a low ranking period for a
Mm-hmm.
movie, like at all. And so I disagree with the ranking. I feel like it wasn't that low. I wouldn't say it was my top, but I'd smack it somewhere in the middle. I definitely did enjoy the film. It was definitely different. And I think that was very well established in the very beginning with the Star Wars,
Kind of
like,
scroll up. Right. Right.
yeah, I feel like that took me out because we've never really seen something like that in a
Mm-hmm.
film. So it already felt very different. And I think, obviously this was a lot more of a mature film because it did have a sex scene. It was a little bit more dramatic. And I feel like they were establishing a lot, obviously, a whole different sector of the world, a whole different species of people, and a whole different um, just everything. And I think it's going to set the tone for a lot of things that are going to happen, continuing on in this phase. Like I said, there was a lot of things I think kind of kept me from putting it a lot higher. I think the storytelling could have been a little bit
Mm-hmm.
smoother. I think that the flashback scenes felt a little bit more choppy and chunky instead of like flowing with the story that was being
Mm-hmm.
told. But overall, I did enjoy it. I think the parts that you kind of pointed out aren't the areas that like marked it down for me. I think overall, like the way the story was told, there were some sections that felt a little chunky, and I think that's more so for me in the flashback scenes, which I don't want to say it's like a cheap way of storytelling. That's not the wording I want to say, but it's kind of like in order for us to understand what is happening in the present. We have to keep going back in chunks, and I feel like that's where the movie felt a little short for me. Obviously, it had to establish a whole bunch of things where I feel like that's maybe where the comedy had to
Mm-hmm.
lack. And so in that respect, I was okay with it because I felt like I got a decent amount of that Marvel lightheartedness with certain characters. Like I can't remember off the top of my head, but we gotta name him again because he's another great supporting
Mm-hmm.
character,
Mm-hmm.
Karun. And then the I think it's what's his name? Kingo is the
Correct.
Eternal that
Mm-hmm.
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
exactly. They established a lot of the comedy in the film along with
Mm-hmm.
other things, but definitely a lot more dramatic than other MCU films. But I think it still retains some of that MCU aspect. But I can definitely see where a lot of people felt like it just tasted very differently than
Right.
other
It's
MCU films.
like you're making me eat my vegetables here. You know what I'm saying? Like, if it came down to it, give me my pizza, give me my sweets, give me all the stuff that I want. Don't give me a plate full of vegetables and tell me that it's a veggie pizza. No, it's not. I'm sorry. But one thing I do want to kind of go back to as far as what you mentioned, like you said it, like you would have put this over Thor Dark World, the Dark World.
I feel like I would. I think something that I thought was really cool was getting a new sector or being introduced to a new sector of the MCU, which I will admit I was kind of resistant
Mm-hmm.
on before entering this phase. I felt like I kind of softened on the idea before watching Shang-Chi. And then when I watched Shang-Chi, I felt like I was ready to be introduced to more and new parts of the
Correct.
MCU. And so I think that's always really exciting. But I think that's also an aspect that a lot of people are kind of resistant on, which I get because I mean, for me, it feels like we just said goodbye to Tony
Mm-hmm.
Stark. You
Mm-hmm.
know, like I think it's very hard to say goodbye to these characters that have established the MCU to be what it
Mm-hmm.
is the past like 10 years and now have to say goodbye to them and then still open up our hearts for like new
Mm-hmm.
characters, like new worlds. Like, it's a lot to take
But
in.
see, let me
So
stop you before we go off track. Just because the only reason why I want to more so defend Thor: The Dark World is because the Thor: The Dark World. We by that point when that movie came out, we had already gotten two movies with characters that we've already kind of gotten to know, which was Thor and Loki. We got them in the first Thor, and we got them in the Avengers. And then from there, yes, The Dark World was a darker MCU movie, a little bit more dramatic, but I feel like things hit a little harder when it came down to, I guess, the history of the Dark Elves and everything like that. And then eventually you think Loki dies in there for one moment, you know. So in this film here, there was no movie. I mean, moment that 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 hit like that. Yeah, there were moments to where certain characters die, and we'll get to that. But we didn't get a chance to even know these characters before they were actually even taken out,
take it out in one way.
dying in this movie.
Oh, oh, oh my god, that's right. People died in this
Right.
movie. Spoiler. And you know what? I get that. I get that. But I think it also depends on what like these films are like serving. Obviously, the Thor: Dark World is the second installment to his own like series, and then it's like I think the third film we've seen Thor in at that point. So yes, we've been established with those characters prior
Mm-hmm.
to being that the new phase, and like there was a very big like what's the word like demand, but there's a very big uh with 10
Mm-hmm.
characters, right? We had like, I think it was 10
Mm-hmm.
Eternals. There's a lot to do. There is a lot to do. I feel like I can kind of lean on your point and say that maybe it would have been nice to establish one or maybe a few of the characters in prior films, maybe like just something small to where we can be like we've had rapport with one or two of them and then kind of melt into the story a little bit more so yeah, I could definitely lean on that point and say I feel like that would have been something that would have made it easier to be introduced to so many new
Mm-hmm.
characters and so concepts. So I think that's definitely something Marvel could have done to prep us for the veggies.
Okay. So those were, I'm going to say, our quote unquote opening statements in this trial here. So from there, as far as topics, where would you want to take it first?
We kind of talked a little bit about the aspects of the film that we weren't really too pleased
Mm-hmm.
with, and we can always revisit to more of that as we like continue on. But I think a great place to start is kind of some of the things that the film I think established really well, just kind of in a broad and general sense. And one of those big things for me is just the diversity in cast in this
Oh,
film.
yeah.
I loved it. And we talked about it in previous episodes because that was something I think we were both really excited
Mm-hmm.
about. Because definitely, I think if this film was released, say, like 10 years ago or just closer to the beginning of the MCU, I don't think you'd be seeing like the level of diversity you're seeing, like, in like,
Correct.
you got it
Correct. We
all.
got like, so
Yeah.
say as of lately, before phase four, we got of a lot of, surface level. We got a lot of white characters, got a few black characters. And then phase four's come and we got Shang-Chi. We got the entire cast of the Eternals. We got Miss Marvel here. It's like right now, phase four, Marvel's just like, okay, now we're gonna take it a little bit everywhere and include a little bit of everybody. So I'm not mad at that. And with that being said, as far as the diversity that was, let's say, quote unquote, on purpose by the main villain, which is Erisham. Okay. Before we get into that, this is spoiler talk. I love to shout out Felipe. He actually just joined, but if you have not seen Eternals, we are going to go into some spoiler talk here. So now, when it comes down to Erisham, okay, a little background. Erisham is going to be, well, not going to be. He is the Celestial of this movie. Now, this movie, it gave us more of a definition of who the Celestials are, or I can say a certain race of Celestials, because if anything, we've talked before as far as other Celestials. One being Ego from Guardians of the Galaxy, and he looks nothing like any of these Celestials here. And as far as the only other Celestial that we know of, that would be the Celestial Nowhere, which is a head that people have pretty much turned into a planet. Now, I would assume that this one, Nowhere, is in relation to Erisham, just simply for the fact that these are ginormous beings, and especially when you see towards the end of this movie, Erisham, he arrives to Earth, and like the scale of his whole body, and like how everybody looks up, everybody can see him in the sky. He almost covers the whole sky. He comes out of nowhere, teleports. But this is our first quote unquote introduction of this race of Celestials. Do you agree with that?
Yes, because well, we've seen, like you said, Nowhere, which is supposed to be the head of this Celestial, which I believe has been stated or has been confirmed to be a particular
Mm-hmm.
one. I don't have that in my head. I did post it in my stories a couple episodes back, so I think I'll just refresh those for you
With
guys after this episode. Yeah. And we did also see a Celestial in the introduction of the Power Stone in Guardians of the
mm-hmm.
Galaxy Volume, where the collector is kind of explaining the history of the Infinity Stones, calling them, you know, the six
Mm-hmm.
singularities that emerge. And so in this film, when we're being introduced to the Celestials, Erisham, and then the Eternals, it sets up that they predate the Big Bang. They predate the Infinity
Mm-hmm.
Stones. So I think that concept is just as massive as Airship is in size, because I feel like for us, like our everything in terms of the in terms of ranking of power has kind of put Infinity Stones at the highest. I feel like that was kind of erased after we saw Loki and just how the stones are absolutely
Mm-hmm.
powerless and like the and things. So it's really cool. It's cool to be introduced to characters, and I believe Ego, he calls himself a
Mm-hmm.
celestial, but he also, like, oh, you're a god. I think is what like Quill asked him, and he's like little g,
Yeah.
small g. So he's definitely not the same race as what, these Celestials
Correct.
are. Mhm.
Like I would think I won't say it's safe to assume, but I don't want to box celestials into one category. I would put ego in another branch of like celestials, being that this is what's being introduced to us on film. Like, say me, I don't have, I guess, the quote unquote knowledge of what it is in the comics, but as far as what's being put out there, they put it out in Guardians 2 that he is a quote unquote celestial, and now we have a different type in this movie. And again, his name is Arishem. And here, Arishem is the creator of the Eternals. Now,
Yeah.
one thing that I was curious about before I saw that, because I know even in the trailer they mentioned that they had been on Earth for 7,000 years, right? So I was thinking that these beings were more so an organic type of being, something that could, if anything, they may very well may possibly have offspring on Earth or whatnot. But uh, to to uh, to our understanding now is they're basically androids, almost like Vision, if it's safe to say, and each one is given certain abilities. Now, I'm not I'm not opposed to the abilities that was given to them, but as far as how they came across on screen, the only person who had super badass moments with their abilities was Thena. Okay, I'm gonna post up a picture of her if y'all don't know. That is Angelina. Let me get rid of Airsham real quick and then throw up Thena. Boom. Okay, so when it came down to every single one, I would say it was two. Two people that had awesome abilities, and that was Thena, and that was, for me, in my opinion, Gilgamesh. And um, that's two out of, let's say, 10 total. That everybody else, I don't know. Sprite, she looked cool as far as what she could do. She's, I would say, an illusionist, and everybody else, I don't know. Their powers are almost kind of lacking to me, and I feel like it was because of that. Maybe 2.5 out of 10. It's not enough to make me feel like this is more so a Marvel movie, because let's say if this is quote unquote the Avengers or any Avengers movie and we have 10 characters, everybody is respectively badass. But here we don't get that. We only get that with maybe a handful of characters here.
See, that also bothered me, but for a different reason than yours. So I don't feel like the variety of, I guess, like rankings of powers in the Eternals was bothersome because it made it less of a Marvel movie. For me, it was more so that I assumed like the Eternals to be like to some higher degree of superheroes than what we've really seen
Mm-hmm.
previously. Much more indestructible than, say, Iron Man in his suit, or Captain Rogers, or things like that. Like that's kind of the level of characters that I assumed I was being
Mm-hmm.
introduced to, and I think that may still be the case because obviously they were fighting deviants, and deviants are supposed to be capable of killing like
Mm-hmm.
Eternals, you know. So I believe that, but I think because we don't see them interact with any other characters apart from that, it's hard for us to envision them being much more powerful than, say, other characters we've been introduced to. So that for that reason, that was bothersome. And I would just also include, for me, very similarly, I think Athena, Gilgamesh, and Ikaris were kind of like my top ones in terms of like, whoa, like those powers definitely look like the big bads, not the big bads, but like the elites in the Eternals. And I think it bothered me more so because apart from those characters who could definitely hold their own much much
Mm-hmm.
better. The other ones felt more vulnerable to me, and that's where that kind of bothered me in terms of the powers for
Right.
sure.
And let's say, well, you call him Icarus. I call him Icarus. Tomato, tomato. When it comes down
Right.
to Icarus, right? Like I'm gonna compare him to DC. Okay. Reason being is the trailers made him seem to be like a Superman here. Okay. Now Icarus, in the main battle towards the end, he had let's call it a scuffle with Makari, and Makari is the quote unquote Flash of this team. Now, if y'all watch this, Makari was beating him up like it was nothing. This is going from me expecting Superman, but me now seeing that it's just somebody that can shoot laser beams and fly, and he came off super weak to me. That's why I didn't put him in the top of the, let's say, stronger characters. Because if Makari can do that, she stood out, and if anything, she could have won. Yeah, he may have figured out a power, but all in all, I think she not only made it like an even match, but it just came to the point to where she was overpowering him.
I can see why he wasn't included on like your like top of the hierarchy. The reason I think I felt like and I agree. I think when he was introduced in the trailers, he looked to be like ranked with Superman, which is not just DC like the elite of heroes, but I think overall, like to the extent that they had to create kryptonite to even try to make things interesting because they just made him so
Mm-hmm.
indestructible in the comics. And I think we quickly learned that it wasn't to that extent in terms of his abilities, because yeah, it's flight and like the laser beams. That's kind of as much as you can draw a
Right,
parallel at this
right.
point. The reason I still held them to be up on that hierarchy is because the response that all the others Eternals had when they were like, "It's him," like we can't, like nine of us can't beat him if like he's trying to ensure that this new celestial can emerge from Earth. You know what I mean? So for that reason, I still kept him pretty high up on my list. But I do agree that I think his abilities were a little
Let's say
uh,
lackluster. Let's say that.
I'm trying to look for the right word, but I think that fits just
Oh
fine
no,
because it was
I
definitely
want to bring up this one clip I saw a few months back, and it was like this. I'm kind of going sidetrack because it doesn't have anything to do with the Eternals. But say it was like an animation of Superman, Homelander, and Omni Man all having a conversation, right? Now, just to think of those three characters, if y'all are familiar with all three of them, they are pretty much the same being, just for different comics, different stories, different whatever, right? I wouldn't put Icarus in that, like I wouldn't make them a fourth in that, just because of what I saw here in the Eternals.
agreed. I think what sets them apart in terms of what makes them Eternals, why are they so special, is like their longevity. Obviously, they've survived for as long as they did, and that's obviously because of their bionic
Correct.
form. It bothered me a little bit. The way, I don't know, it just like it was kind of a little bit of a, I don't know. I expected more from their origin, but it does mirror the comics a
Mm-hmm.
little bit. The comics, basically, the origins of the Eternals in general were that the Celestials were basically enamored by humans' abilities to adapt through the years because they witnessed essentially the change from like ape into like semi
Mm-hmm.
man,
Mm-hmm.
right? When they it's called the first host, I believe, where they sent a celestial came and started doing like experimentation on like the humans, and then created deviants, which were not what they wanted to create. And then eventually they created Eternals, which were, I think they started off with 100, and they could not I was gonna say breed, but that makes them sound like animals. But they could not
Right.
interbreed, but they like procreate with other species like deviants and
Mm-hmm.
humans. So to kind of like what you had initially thought that they would be like, that's kind of like from the first phase. I think it was around the fourth phase where Eternals had like split. There were some Eternals, I think, living on Uranus, some were on Earth, and the ones on Earth had just emerged from like their second, somewhat of a civil war type of thing. And I think the conflict in that second civil war was whether more Eternals should be made or if they should just stay absolute in terms of their number. And eventually they came to a conclusion where a certain Eternal could go to Titan and start creating new Eternals that were both biologically made but also like mechanically made, which is kind of what we're seeing in this film of that type of branch of
Mm-hmm.
Eternals. And just kind of on a side note, the person who assisted this particular celestial to create this new reign of Eternals is Thanos' mother, who later births obviously Thanos, who is a Eternal who has a deviant gene. So I know that was a lot, but but that's just kind of a little bit of the origin of the Eternals in the
Mm-hmm.
comics, and it seems they're drawing more on that like on that fourth arrival where they create Eternals that were somewhat biologically made but also
Okay.
mechanically made.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
So say from here, I do want to touch on a topic because I did want to discuss it. You mentioned earlier a phrase called ranking of power. Okay. And this is going back to talking about the Celestials just for a second. Now, do you know if they are multi-dimensional beings?
I don't know. I do not know. Yeah, it seems like from what I've read, the majority of the history I've read on them have been in like on this like universe, if
Correct,
you will.
correct. So say if we were to introduce them to the multiverse, then all in all, each quote unquote, I don't know, verse in the multiverse has their own version of these celestials. So there is, let's say, an infinite amount of celestials, right? What do you think?
Yeah, I think that's safe to
Okay.
assume.
All right.
Mm-hmm.
I was just curious, just because in watching this, that's one thing that they didn't really expound upon. They kind of like when Arishem was explaining to Cersei, he explained where the Eternals come from and what they're meant to do. But when it comes down to the 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 sacred timeline, I don't want to say the MCU, but when it comes down to these stories just in general, right now currently Phase 4 is turning into a multiversal, multi-dimensional type of phase, and this is almost to me almost like a step back because this is another like singular moment that's happening in one universe as opposed to what's affecting the rest of the multiverse.
Right. I think it serves as an establishing film for obviously the characters that we're meeting, what their interactions with humans have been thus
Mm-hmm.
far, what the split, was caused by. Because obviously we have some Eternals who are having to face like, the repercussions of going against Arishem's
Mm-hmm.
plan. We have another sector who have like branched into different parts of the universe to find a different planet for all of you know life on Earth to move
Right.
to. And I wouldn't say. I mean, I guess you can kind of look at it as a step back, but I think it's a necessary step back to push forward with the story because we can't just jump into how they interact with the multiverse if we don't understand them previously. Almost to your point of like, let's get to know these characters before we see that interaction with the rest of the MCU that we've known thus
Mm-hmm.
far, and then the you we're still going to continue to learn as we dive deeper into the multiverse of madness and all the other things. um, and so I think it serves very similarly to even say like a WandaVision, establishing Wanda as the Scarlet
Mm-hmm.
Witch, what that entails when it comes to the MCU, and essentially loading that up for how that's going to merge into the bigger picture of the multiverse. And I think that's what this film is just establishing is essentially who are these
Mm-hmm.
characters, what are their ties thus far to Earth. They're obviously aware of like the Avengers and Captain Rogers, all of they've made like little references to them. And so I think the next time that we're going to revisit the Eternals are we're going to see much more of how they tie into the rest of the story. So I think I'm okay with it being almost a step
Okay.
back.
So, um, as of right now, as far as post this story, now the Earth is quote unquote rid of deviants. Okay. Now we saw multiple instances, even since the beginning of the movie, of the deviants attacking somewhere on Earth, more so attacking the Eternals as opposed to humans. Now, with that, we're seeing a whole bunch of activity over the Earth, but we're not getting any instances of any characters that we know already. You know, that's another thing that I'm always going to be a stickler on is not only just a cameo, but just something that references the rest of the universe. Because yes, they mentioned Steve Rogers. Yes, they mention vibranium with the IKEA table, but at the end of the day, I know this movie is 100% them, but if there is no like quick cut to, let's say, what's the colonel's name from he's the villain in the Hulk, and he was also in Civil War.
It's his name.
Ross,
Ross.
right. If it
Ross.
comes down to it, if there could be like a quick cut to Ross freaking out in some command center, like, what the F is going on in whatever country there's something coming to you out of the earth, sir. Da, 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 da. Like, all in all, when it comes down to it, something that kind of gives us a glimpse back. Like, I'm gonna say this for everything, like I did with Suicide Squad and Superman getting shot. Like, just it could be a 4 or 5 second clip of something that we know. It just adds a little bit to the story to make it a little bit more enjoyable and a little bit more relatable to the rest of the universe.
I think that's fair, especially because I mean, realistically, that's a 5 second shot to just reflect back to something as simple as like Ross, which is a character that's been very well established even before really the history of the
Correct.
MCU as we know.
Mm-hmm.
He, but he obviously has a bigger role to play in future films as well. So I think that would be like a really appropriate cameo that could have been meshed into the film
Yeah.
for sure. I think that they still did something like that in their own kind of way with those small references to prior characters we've seen, but also with the establishing of not just like their story and their world, but also characters like Jon Snow's character. What's his name? Dark Knight?
I think
Is
it's
that what
called
it's
Black
called?
Knight, or yeah, Black Knight.
Black.
Dark Knight's Batman. I think he's Black
Uh,
Knight.
I'm gonna get right. Um, but Black Knight, and then even when we get like the voice of
Mm-hmm.
Blade at the end of it, which was confirmed. Like I think that they still did their piece in trying to connect to things that we know are coming, which served that kind of feel that I think you're looking for. But I agree, a 5 second little shot of Ross, not too much to
But
ask
see,
for, not
right,
too much.
right then and there, right when you just said that, that was more so like, yes, we're quote unquote referencing some characters that comic book readers would know, should know, you know. But for the people who never got into the comics, let's say let's start at the first post credit scene. I don't have any images for it just because I didn't want to put any images up. I was actually towards the end of the movie. There was like, as soon as Eros got onto the screen, Eros is played by what's
Harry,
who?
Harry
Harry
Styles.
Styles. I couldn't understand what was going on in the theater because there was a girl fangirling behind me. Like, she's like, oh my god. And I was like, what the hell is going on? Like, I'm looking back and then I look forward and I'm just like, oh, it's this guy, and I probably missed something. Like, I see some leprechaun looking creature come out of nowhere, which is voiced by I can't think of his name, but he's a super famous nerd. Okay, like, I've known him forever to talk comics in. be a comedian. He's super funny, and now he's playing this leprechaun-looking creature, and he travels alongside Harry Styles, aka Eros, who is now claiming to be the brother of Thanos, which is now opening up a new world of questions. But these are references that I wouldn't have got if I didn't read the comics or if there was no internet. Because say it was the internet that explained where this could go, you know. And now on to the second post credit scene. We see I don't want to call him Black Knight just yet. We see Dane, and right then and there, we get Dane throughout the entire movie, and we're thinking him to be just an average college or school professor that is in love with Cersei, that has no issues with the problems that she has. He's just real cool, calm, and just like, oh, you're an Eternal. Oh, you can do this. Oh, this bus didn't crash into me. It turned into roses, but I guess that's normal where you're from. Like, he didn't freak out at all, which was kind of telling that he could be somebody to begin with. But then, like, when that post credit scene came, I wouldn't have known anything about, like, say the sword that is reacting to his touch, like wanting him to touch it. And then we hear a voice, and now, yes, it's been confirmed that it's Marshall Ali. But with that being said, now we're getting a glimpse of, now Blade is here. But now in that leaves us with, Blade was born a vampire. Okay, there's no question about that. So now they're saying, being that this is his voice sounding like an adult, that vampires have been among us this whole entire time, and it's not more so going to be introduced to us by Morbius, but more so they're going to do a backstory of where and when they're inserted into the MCU timeline. So I don't want to say that's a problem. I am getting a little hot over here, but all in all, when it comes down to it, these references are something that only comic book knowers would know. So
And this is where I'm like, and what is the problem? I feel like this is very, like, on point for the MCU. To be honest, I feel like we can go back and look at other films where little clues, little like snippets of something where maybe in the moment you don't really know what it's about. And I mean, luckily, I know you're like, oh, like, what if the internet wasn't a thing? Luckily, it is a thing. And that's where, like, people like you and I are like, oh, who's that voice? Okay, we go and we start looking. And, I feel like that is part of the reason the MCU is so, like, I don't know, it has sparked a new love for like the comics for a lot of people, because the only way you would really know more about Scarlet Witch, the Vision, and other characters, if you hadn't already been exposed to them, say prior like content or things like
mm-hmm.
that, is if you looked at the comics, right? So I feel like this, like everything you just said, I think is what keeps the MCU
but
alive.
say but
Because
say in that, right? I'm thinking back into the MCU, and there's only maybe been one or two times to where they have done this, and with that, I would say the end of um, Captain America and the Winter Soldier. That's when we're introduced to Wanda and her brother, and say by this point I didn't know who the Maximoffs were, uh, but now we're fast forwarding into something that has already had three movies. Something that has already been referenced in not only comics but animated shows as well. And initially, when you hear the voice talk to Dane, and he's like, "Are you sure you want to do that?" Like, one, who else is in this house with him? You know, this guy Dane is a quote unquote member of a family that has a history of being this Black Knight that wields this sword, right? And from here, I'm thinking, is this somebody that lives with him? Is this somebody that like I was thinking it was like a butler or something like that initially before I even went to look and see who the voice was. So all in all, I'm thinking this is something in relation to that family. So am I hating on how they're going to introduce Blade? No, because I am going to see Blade. But as far as what this did at the end of the movie, if if there was no internet, if there was no confirmation that this was Marshala Ali, then we would have just been left to wonder until maybe like 2022 or 2023 if and when the Black Knight gets a movie, because currently he's not on the slate as far as what's been posted. You know, right now the next movie that we're gonna get, or I guess quote unquote unknown movie that we're gonna get, is going to be Moon Knight, I believe. Moon Knight, and was there anybody else huge that's getting their own solo movie? Because I know they listed the
Uh,
shows, but as far as movies are concerned.
not I can think of like off the top of my head, but I know we're getting a few. Yeah.
So right now we're getting Black Knight and Blade's voice in 2021.
Mhm.
We're what? We're not gonna see them now until 2023 or 2024. So why give that to us now?
And look, I'm gonna say it again. I feel like that's very MCU. They did this with Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2 with the introduction of Adam, which we're not going to get a revisit to and for another maybe 2 years or so, unless of course we see him come up in like the holiday special, which he may very well be
Mm-hmm.
part of. And that's a thing. I can't like remember the exact year, but definitely like a maybe 5 years of a caps, you know. So this is very MCU. I feel like all the questions you're posing are intentional. Like I think that's the purpose, is for people to ask, like, oh, who was that? What was this? Who's this character? And I think that they did something a very smart move on Marvel's part, and bring people who are already established in terms of actors who have very huge fan bases. Harry Styles, Jon Snow. I can't remember the actor's actual
Kit
name.
Harrington.
But I think they did a really smart job of bringing in these characters who have a fan base, who are already established, because even if you aren't aware of the references for the particular characters like the Black Knight or uh, Blade, if you maybe even just the enthusiasm of being like, oh my god, this is Harry Styles, like who is he playing, what is
Mm-hmm.
this, now I have all these comics from like their run, you know. I just feel like this is very MCU for me. This is the aspect of the film that I think actually really drew upon a lot of things that they've done prior, and even if it's not establishing a new character, even just a new concept, because I think another example that's coming to mind that I think is very similar to this is the end of, I believe it's Iron Man 2, where we see Agent Coulson, and he's at like the pit where we
It's
obviously
Thor's
know
hammer.
is Will
Mm-hmm.
ended.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. And you know, that seems like a very like pop culture thing. Like most people at this point for sure know who Thor is, but at that point there could have been a big sector of people who didn't, you know? And that's another way people would ask questions and maybe be a little frustrated, get a little heated, and find that, like, because I think that's what drives that curiosity and continues this franchise for so long. So I get the frustration and I get the questions, but I think that for the people who are fans of these characters, I feel like that's awesome. For the people who aren't fans of these characters or aren't already aware of them, I feel like that's where they ask questions, get curious, and maybe this is what sparks a new love, a new interest, a new favorite character. I know that's exactly what happened with me and like Wanda and the Vision and all of that. So I think this is very MCU, and I think just as heated as it's getting you on like the far end, it's getting me just as heated and like, no, like this is amazing. But we're always gonna. I think there will always find people who that um format just doesn't land on, but I think it lands on a lot of people. And like I said, I think the character, like the casting, was done very
Mm-hmm.
well to almost propel people for that. Like if you don't have the incentive to like, you know, just look, see like, oh, whose voice was that, or who's this person like
Mm-hmm.
playing, who was Arrows, I don't really care. I do care because it's Harry Styles, you know what I mean? So I think I really like that. I
Eye
love that
roll.
they
There,
did that.
that is an eye roll right there. Why? Because it's Harry Styles. Like, listen, I haven't seen any movies that he's been in, but I know he has acting chops. Like, I've looked him up on IMDb, and I know he was in that. I think it was like a World War II movie, which was super dramatic or whatnot. and then like maybe one or two. But I only know him to be a musician, not really more so an actor. And I get it. Like you want to get that star factor that's going to bring the fangirls out. You know, I'm sure even after watching this, and then some fangirls watching this, they're like, wait, Harry Styles is in this? Oh my god, like I gotta go. But no, all in all, if it comes down to what you said earlier, let's talk about like you said the end of Iron Man 2, and we are introduced to Mjolnir, right? We already know who that belongs to because the Avengers, no matter how many times the Avengers have changed, whether it's the new Avengers, the young Avengers, any type of Avengers, Thor is the OG that everybody knows of, okay? Because if there's gonna be a show, an animated series or whatnot, Iron Man, Captain America, and Thor are gonna be there no matter what. Now, as far as what's going on moving forward, I'm not gonna say I'm mad. Yes, I may seem a little heated right now, but at the end of the day, I know that I mentioned it before in another podcast. We are moving into the world of the unknown. Okay, we're moving beyond. Let's call them the commercial Avengers, the Avengers that we know of, yeah, on screen. And now we're moving forward into uh, different characters that involve different level events because I would put Falcon and the Winter Soldier and Hawkeye as surface level events. Then we have Wanda that sits in between the surface and the multi-dimensional. And then we have Loki that's going to be more so on the multi-dimensional fully. Now, or multiversal fully. Now we're getting other characters that I also stated that we're going to go into, let's call it the dark world, okay? Because in Falcon and the Winter Soldier, we are introduced to the Carter, who is the broker, and she is not necessarily street level, but let's say she's underground level. I would put her in that category. I would put Shang-Chi's sister in that category. I would put um, I would put Blade into that category because that is like vampires. They're not street level, but they are underground levels. But we're gonna get to that. So Kevin Feige and Marvel Studios now branching off and moving away from the surface. It's good because it's fresh, it's new. It's just now for me, being that I don't know, it's more so. All right, I gotta go research. I gotta see who this Leprechaun character is. Oh my goodness, who is Harry Styles? Who is this Arrows person to be brother of Thanos? Because now I know I'm kind of going on a rant right now, but as far as what's going on, what people are saying, oh, Eros was brother of Thanos. Eros is an Eternal. So was the Thanos' agenda actually part of the Eternal agenda? Was he supposed to take out half of the universe for the Eternals? You know, it's raising all these questions to where it may be too early for me to understand.
Okay. And I can definitely empathize with that perspective of it's just a lot of questions. And I think a lot of people are also coming from a point of we've gotten really comfortable with understanding what the MCU feels like, what it looks like, the world of it. Like, I feel like a lot of us feel very proud to be like, oh, yeah, I can tell you all six of the Infinity Stones. I can tell you what they do, where they come from, what film. You know, like, I think people got very comfortable with the knowing. And you're right, like, we're dipping into a realm where we just don't know everything. And it, when you look at the comics, and obviously that, you know, you're like, I gotta research, I gotta eat my veggies, and then I gotta do my homework.
Right, right.
But when you do and you dip into those aspects, you see where they pull a lot of these from, and the majority of the things that have been established in this film all have links to the comic, which is obviously what the MCU does.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there's this is a big jump. We have to kind of lose that feeling of like expertise. I'm like, oh yeah, like I could tell you exactly what that hammer is, what it
This is
does,
about
where
to be
it's
the
from.
Gray Show from here forward. This is all. This is the comic cinematic universe with Grace. Chill is just in the background. He is just more so just listening to what she has to say.
No, and you know something, like these are characters that I'm like Eternals, Blade, even, and in Blade, I mean, obviously we've had films for Blade, and I've never seen them, and so that's a character I'm not familiar with. Black Knight, these are characters I definitely wasn't familiar with prior to watching, say, Eternals. But it's one of the aspects of the MCU that I've really enjoyed is kind of not knowing and then diving into their backstories. And I think that's something I'm grateful for the CCU, because now I do it for a job.
Mm-hmm.
Like I have a reason, whereas before it would just be like particular characters I kind of dove into. But it's definitely a turning point, because a lot of us gotta have to let go of that feeling of like expertise, and like now we're like, well, I know nothing and I don't like it, you know.
Can I ask you a question real quick? Just with that, with not knowing. Let's say Dane, aka the Black Knight, right? Me being unfamiliar with this character, and then them voicing Blade. Blade is out there, and then we get Harry Styles, and I'm gonna call him a leprechaun. Okay, these two post credit scenes in the Eternals, I feel like have overpowered the impact of the movie The Eternals as far as characters are concerned, because we left this movie more so, or I left this movie curious about the post credit scenes and not even of what's to come with the Eternals. So is it safe to say that these last two scenes kind of overshadowed the rest of the movie?
You know something? I feel like I can kind of lean on that side a little bit, because I think the first post-credit scene was the one with Arrows, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Harry Styles?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And given, and we talked about this a little bit earlier, that Eternals had a little bit more of like a dramatic feel. It was a little lighter on the comedy for sure, and I think that was a little necessary just because of all the storytelling they had to do. So I feel like I get that aspect of it. But then you contrast that to that post credit scene with Arrows. First of all, it's not just Arrows; it's freaking Harry Styles. Like just the response you explained that you had in the theaters already changes the atmosphere of you watching this movie in
Mm-hmm.
theaters. Along with that, I feel like I would need to rewatch it again to tell you specifically, but there was something about it that shifted the tone into something that felt very Guardians of the Galaxy for me. Maybe it was the I was gonna say Elf, the the
The
leprechaun.
internet is saying the music was kind of like Guardian
Oh,
esque.
Galaxy is very big on the music, so maybe it was that aspect and that component. So I think that because of those things, I can definitely see that point and maybe lean a little bit on that, where I think the post credit scenes did take a little bit of the spotlight. So I can see that point for sure.
Okay. Um, I don't think I have any other notes. Like I like say if there were character breakdowns, I would have broken down every other character, but I feel like honestly there's no need to. I did appreciate like I mentioned, Thena, Gilgamesh, um, Sprite and her story, because if anything, Sprite I feel had the saddest story, being that she was made young and she can't age. And
Yeah.
that pulled on the heartstrings a little bit, just a little bit. And she happens to be in love with somebody who's in love with Cersei. But
Hmm.
Sprite aside, the only other thing I had that was kind of a letdown was shit. Do I not have the picture? Kingo? Do I not have the Kingo picture? Either way, Kingo, right?
Little guns.
Yeah, like it wasn't the gun part, because I don't know, he could have done He honestly, his powers they resemble the Green Lantern. But when it comes down to him as an actor, right?
Yeah.
Like I mentioned at the very beginning of this, I was expecting this to hit all the MCU cues when it comes to comedy quirks, and he was the one to do it because everything from Silicon Valley to the other movies that he's been in, he has his comedic chops, and he's actually pretty funny. And it depends on who's writing, or even if he's writing, to where here he was put out. Yeah, I know he got jacked and shredded for this role, but he came off super cocky, super arrogant, and his jokes weren't it. It was like I wanted to get like a Tony Stark laugh out of it, or I wanted to get a Thor or a Ragnarok type of laugh out of it, but I wasn't given those moments with that actor.
And maybe it's because I haven't seen too many things that he's been in that I had a different, or I didn't really have too much of an expectation in terms of the comedy we would get from him. Um, but I think I feel like I have an idea just based on like the references you gave. I feel like I tailor his like comedy almost to like the way the Red Guardian was set up, like where there's like a particular scene where the Red Guardian's like talking to, I think it was Yelena,
Mm-hmm.
and he's like, or I'm sorry, to Natasha, and he's like, does he ever talk about me? He's like, who?
Right,
Captain America.
right.
Kind of like that, where he thinks he's much cooler than he is, and he kind of has like, I feel like the comedy resembled him to that respect. I like the comedy coming from him,
Mm-hmm.
but maybe it has to do a little bit with what was expected based on maybe prior roles or where he was,
Correct. Correct. Because if anything, I feel like him and his caliber of acting and the style of movies and shows that he's been on, he would have been like, if we're gonna introduce a new funny to this, he would have been that. And it was his assistant that unfortunately like took all of that from him.
Before, I have a couple other things I wanted to talk about before we finish up, but can we just like talk a little bit longer about Karun?
Sure.
Just because I think we've talked about the MCU, or I think just like the superhero films we've seen so far, is just the lineup of amazing supporting characters is just astounding.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm so happy that Karun is like another, like as soon as like a few seconds with him on film, you were like, yeah, this is Yelena Belova.
Right.
This is
Mm-hmm.
he served as that character. So I thought that was really cool that it just kind of continued. And I know you mentioned Sprite as just one of the storylines that you liked. That's actually directly drawn upon the comics. And the comic Sprite is a boy, but he struggles with the same thing of like, I am stuck as an 11-year-old. And he has his own story with Mad Weary, which is one of the illnesses that the Eternals can succumb to, and we obviously did see this in the
Right.
film. Lee's character Athena was the one who is succumbed to that illness in the film,
Mm-hmm.
but in the comics, Sprite actually did, and so he attempts to do, I can't remember the specifics, but he does something very bad so that in the end he's able to age, which is basically what
Mm-hmm.
Sprite for going on to
Mm-hmm.
Icarus. Icarus?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Icarus died in this storyline. But I thought it was really cool that a lot of this was drawn on different components of the comics. And this is what MCU does. It's never like a direct, line for line adaptation. And I think that you can really appreciate how there's several different sources that are pulled to create the stories we see. Sometimes they land seamlessly. I feel like WandaVision was one of those where it just is, at the end of it, when you rewatch, it's just a beautiful like culmination of so many different
Right.
comic books. One, I think the smoothness could have been better, but considering the amount of things they needed to introduce, I think it was okay.
Yeah.
um and just a couple of things I wanted to dive into that. So I think the things that hit weird for me was like the idea of Mad Weary and then the Unimind. I feel like the Unimind was just a horrible name for what they
Right.
do. It just sounds bad, but it's actually directly from the comics. And so I feel like after that, I'm like, okay, I'll forgive it, because it wasn't like an MCU necessarily creation. It was directly drawn from the comics. And then a last kind of big thing I wanted to talk about was that Obviously, this movie establishes that these Eternals that we meet, all 10 of them, have some form of effect on our
Mm-hmm.
history, and that we view them as the gods in Greek mythology. However, in the comics, the Eternals actually they interact with the actual gods of Greek mythology. So Athena, Zeus, all of them, and so they're two distinctly different like
Mm-hmm.
entities. The way in the comics is that I believe they had some form of confrontation initially, but then they come into this truce where the Eternals would essentially be the representatives of the gods on
Mm-hmm.
Earth. But as a result, which was not the intention, but as a result, the humans started to think the Eternals and the gods were the same thing, and so that overlap is we're essentially introduced to or see in the film, which I thought was really cool because I think much like what the humans in the comics eventually
Mm-hmm.
believe, I thought the Eternals and like the gods of Greek mythology, I'm like, oh, okay, I guess this is where we drew the idea of these gods, but essentially they're two different entities. So I'm wondering if that's something that will be established like later on. I don't think it's important for like the story, but I thought that was pretty
I
cool.
don't think you're far off. Just because, say how they mentioned, like I brought the image of Thena back up here, and Thena was said in the movie to be Athena, right, the goddess of war, right? And with that being that Athena is more so um, a Greek god, there I guess there could be some confusion in the history books because it is said to be in Thor: Love and Thunder that we are going to get Zeus, and Christian Bale, he's also playing the God Killer. So I feel like in some way, shape, or form we are going to get some answers questions with the next Thor, and seeing if it is related to this character Thena in the Eternals.
Yeah, and just kind of a fun fact on that as well is that I can't remember Athena's original name, but it's something that still mirrors Athena. But as part of that agreement that they made with that the Eternals and the gods made, she changed her name to Athena to mirror Athena from Greek mythology.
Gotcha.
So I wonder. I'm guessing we are going to see that clear distinction in future films, and it's going to kind of clarify. But that I thought that was pretty
Yeah.
cool. Um, and lastly, is I thought it was pretty cool that we got like two DC references
Mm-hmm.
in, and so that obviously in my head I'm like, are they telling us something? Are we about to get like a crossover film? Is that what Phase 5 is
Let's
all
not
about?
get
Like the
excited. Let's not. Let's not. Just because the way that what is his name? Fastos. The way Fastos' son reacted to seeing Icarus, it's like, oh no, that's Superman. I was like, I get it, it was a DC comic reference, but with that, I think that establishes that in this universe, DC Comics is a thing. Like in terms of it being comics, not actual characters, but comics as well. So I did catch that. What was, you said there were two? What was the other one?
I want to say that they made like a Batman reference or something. Hold on. I wrote a note. Keep in mind, I wrote these notes like a week ago when we watched the film.
Mm-hmm.
I wrote down that there was a Batman reference, but I can't think to the particular reference that was made. If I remember, I'll post something about it in my stories for you
Yeah.
guys. But even just if it was just the Superman reference, like I clocked it and I was like, ooh, because I can't think of a particular instance where something like this was referenced in prior MCU films.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought that was a stand out for me, and it just raises the question like, are we going to see a crossover film? I feel like there's too much going on for that to
It's
even
too
like
many
happen.
universes. We're not gonna bring the DC universe into the multiverse. Just
Multiverse of that
leave that
thing.
over there. We already got the multiverse of madness of Marvel. You know what I'm saying? Let's not confuse anybody.
Artist, hey everybody. Hey.
No. All right.
um a couple of comments in regards to those reference by, I don't know if it was the director who stated it or someone else, but I believe that was just meant to be they wanted to bring in, I think, different media references in
Yeah.
general in this film.
Yeah.
So something like that. I kind of ignored it. I'm like, no, no, no. This is exactly what you're trying to do to me with the Spideyverse, and I'm not gonna have it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm but that's basically all I have for
Okay.
Eternals.
Well, I think we covered pretty much anything and everything. I think from what I've seen, just from different streams, an idea that I'm going to take from the internet is a ranking of all 20 plus movies in the MCU. We're not going to do this today, but Grace, I want you to kind of get an idea, and we're talking movies, not shows. Okay, this isn't going to be including everything that's coming out on Disney Plus. We're just talking about the movies that have come out so far. So, and then from there, we'll continue to edit. Yeah, we'll continue to edit as the movies come out.
Hell yeah,
Cool.
I like
Cool.
that.
Awesome. All right. Well, so this has been episode 11 of the Comic Cinematic Universe. If you're watching this on YouTube, please hit that like and subscribe button. And yeah, thank you all for tuning in on this Monday. I know, again, it's normally on Fridays, but we had to get it in today on Monday. And yeah, holler at us on Instagram. I got to plug that. Actually, Grace, go ahead and plug that.
Thank you guys for joining. Super fun episode. Make sure to send your comments on either YouTube, Instagram. You can find me on Mighty Grace _ Fits. And I'll be sure to post those little things for you guys. Basically, just highlights that I had posted earlier, but I'll make sure you guys have those because it does kind of talk about the film we just broke down. So thank you guys, and we'll see you guys on the next one. And I think on the next one we're breaking down. Is it Hawkeye already? I feel
Yeah,
like
maybe
it
the
is.
first or yeah, because it comes out, 2 episodes come out the first day. So
Oh, that's right.
yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Oh,
Yeah.
and
We probably guys, we just forget when we get on here, but we'll give that information to you guys for sure.
and a slight switch up to the YouTube, just to make it super easy to find us. I added with Chill and Grace. So if you search the Comic Cinematic Universe with Chill and Grace, it'll pop up. And I've tested it because initially I just put the original the Comic Cinematic Universe, and there's too many cinematic universe reference videos on YouTube talking about DC and Marvel. So when looking us up, search the Comic Cinematic Universe with Chill and Grace, and we are gonna be there. Cool.
Or just hit the subscribe button and put that little notification
Hit the
thing
bell.
on.
That's right.
Boom.
All right, y'all. We will catch y'all on the next one. That date will be TBD because, again, I am going to be out of town for a bit. So we will post it on our Instagram. But keep it locked. Stay tuned. And yeah, we'll let you know when that is. Grace, it was lovely having you. Thank you again.
Always, always. Have a good one,
Yep.
guys. Thank
We will
you.
check y'all later. Bye.